Hello, cruel world. My name is Dr. Shaham Das. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders for a living so that you don't have to. This episode is all about revenge. Now, I'm sure most of us have all had bosses that have treated us like dirt, maybe an ex-partner that's cheated on us, an ex-KGB agent that slaughtered all of our family, and we've all had violent fantasies about retaliation. But why do some people go on to commit revenge but not others? This episode is a dissection of the psychological processes behind revenge. What are the motivations? What are the character traits? And the ultimate question, does revenge make us feel better? And what is the effect on our psyche? Plus, I'm going to throw in there which personality disorder lends itself to revenge. All of this, and I've also selected quite a tragic but fascinating real-life case of revenge. And a little bonus for my Psych for Sore guys and girls, I'm going to tell you about my opinion, what's the worst and best revenge film that I've seen in recent times. So sit back, grab your hit list, and welcome to Psych for Sore Minds. Okay, before we begin, I'm going to show you a clip that's related to a case that I'm going to examine later on in this episode. Here you go. Okay, so I'm pretty sure you'll agree that that was quite an emotional clip. We'll come back onto it. Why most people don't commit revenge can be kind of thought of as follows. For most of us, acting vengefully never gets past the fantasy stage because our rational mind kicks in along with like our restrictions and our moral compasses. And this is related to fear of continued reprisal or fear of the law, getting in trouble. And because most of us are not petty, so we're not unduly concerned with trivial matters, especially in a kind of small-minded or spiteful way. So if we are wronged and if we are disrespected, we might feel upset at the time, but we move on with our lives, which begs the main question for this episode. What are the motivations for those people who seek revenge? So I would say it was this. Some people do it because they seek power and because it's related to their authority and their status. So revenge can actually serve a purpose, and that's to remind other people that you are not to be trifled with, especially if you live in a society where the rule of law is weak. So in this kind of scenario, revenge provides us with a way to keep order. So for example, if you're a drug dealer and one of your rivals encroaches on your territory, you need to send them a message to show that you're not weak. In the parlance of my younger hip-hop inspired viewers, if you be shot in, you might have to pull out the biscuit if your ops are on your block, my G. Another motivation is a fear of continued reprisal. So you might need to stand up to the bully. So for example, if you're in prison, you're not going to be anybody's bitch. So if somebody, pushes you around, you're going to have to break their jaw just to cement yourself in the hierarchy of prison. By the way, if you're interested in prison, go and check out my episode with my man Chris Atkins, who is a reporter who spent some time in prison due to fraud, and his perspective of what it was like as a white middle-class male fitting into that environment. Moving on, another scenario where people might be more drawn towards revenge could be if they feel that there's no other way to legally obtain justice. So there is no law enforcement, or law enforcement doesn't care or doesn't believe what's been going on. For example, if you live in the favelas of Brazil, then they will have their own kind of system on revenge if the law or the society's norms are seen to be broken. I'm going to throw in another kind of scenario. It's a bit more obtuse and a bit less common of an impetus, but actually revenge could be a delayed lashing out at a previous oppressor. So the person who you carry out your revenge on might actually represent somebody else from your past. So I work as a forensic psychiatrist. I work on psychiatric wards and I rehabilitate mentally disordered offenders. And on more than one occasion, I've seen somebody who's lashed out in the context of being slighted or being bullied way beyond what you would consider natural or healthy. And it's because when we've done a psychological analysis of them, they themselves were physically abused as children and they got pushed around. So they've built up all this tension and this angst and this rage, and they've let it sort of snap out uncharacteristically and disproportionately, that's the word I've been looking for, on a certain target because of their previous abuse. Okay, let's move on. What are the character traits commonly related to revenge? Well, some of them are quite obvious. There's kind of anger, there's a neuroticism, so specifically to hold a grudge. Then there's narcissistic traits, so having social confidence and a sense of entitlement, yet also paradoxically a sense of insecurity. And then there's impulsiveness, natural aggression, a lack of empathy, being very sensitive or paranoia. So, feeling easily disrespected or slighted. And remember, kids, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean people aren't trying to kill you. I asked you before what personality disorder lends itself to revenge, and my answer from my clinical experience is paranoid personality disorder. So very quickly, a personality disorder is like your ingrained natural characteristics, personality traits, as opposed to a mental illness like schizophrenia, which is a change in your baseline because of specific symptoms. So people with paranoid personality disorder are naturally paranoid, as the name suggests. They have a tendency to hold grudges. They have this pervasive kind of distrust and suspicion about other people and other people's motives. And they sometimes have this unjustified belief that other people are trying to harm them or deceive them. And therefore they have this suspicion about loyalty and trustworthiness of others in general. For this particular personality disorder, there are subtler signs. So for example, there's a hesitancy to confide in others due to like an irrational fear that others will use information against them. So that's why they have no close friends. They have a perception that innocent remarks or non-threatening situations, they perceive them as insults or attack. And so because of this, they're angry and they're hostile to perceived slights or insults. So what does that all mean? What am I telling you? Why am I telling you this? It's because somebody with paranoid personality disorder, if insulted, even if it's banter, they're much more likely to stew over it for even years, and they will look for an opportunity eventually to gain their retribution. So, a Psych for Soul guys, do you know somebody like this? Tell me your stories in the comments section below. By the way, if you're interested, see my video on personality disorders, not only defining what they are, but I've made another video on whether I think it's fair to label people with personality disorders. It is a contentious issue. Moving on, what is the actual effects on our psyche when we go through the process of committing revenge? Pay attention, kids, here comes the science. Remember, my aim to make these videos is to start making you think like a forensic psychiatrist, also to take over the world, but we'll come on to that. So there was a study called The Benefits, Costs and Paradox of Revenge, Social and Personality, it was released in the publication called Social and Personality Psychology Compass, which is your second favorite publication after Viz. So for all of you nerds, I've put the links of the details of the description of the study if you want to go chiggity check it out yourself. The authors of this study noted that anecdotally, people tend to believe that retribution gives some kind of effective release intention immediately, and it can relieve this anger that somebody feels towards the transgressor and their actions. And they believe that revenge replaces negative emotions with positive ones. But, and here's the kicker, in their study, these authors noticed that whilst participants thought they would feel better after exacting revenge, actually the opposite happens. So they found that punishing the original perpetrator did provide a release, but it in fact also made the participants focus and ruminate about both the culprit and the act more. So I guess what I'm saying is that by committing revenge, they're obsessing over feeling wronged in the first place. However, having said that, other research has showed that the supposed cathartic effect of revenge is largely fictional. That said, it does turn out that revenge can deliver a jolt of pleasure, especially towards men. So what I mean is, in another study, Tanya Singer and her colleagues had male and female participants, and they engaged in this economic game where players either played fairly or unfairly, and then they measured their activities in the participant's brain with an MRI scan as they saw either the cheating players or the fair players receive an electric shock. And basically they did get this jolt of pleasure when the cheaters were punished. So to summarize all of that research, it showed that the supposed cathartic effects of revenge is largely a fiction. For the first few moments, there is a feeling of reward in the brain, but despite that, psychological scientists have found that instead of quenching hostility, revenge prolongs the unpleasantness of the original offence. Okay, what I'm going to do now is turn the joke meter down and get serious, because I'm going to talk about the ultimate revenge case. There's nothing funny about this situation, and I have nothing but sympathy and empathy for the victim. I chose this case not only because it's fascinating, but it's been trending recently. So even though it's an old case, it's been trending on YouTube because of a reconstruction clip, which is the one that you saw at the beginning of this video, which I generously showed you. Before I get into it, let me introduce you to this channel. It's called A Schmike for Small Minds. It covers a smorgasbord of topics related to true crime and mental illness and the crossover between the two. I am your third favourite London-based Asian gold-tooth forensic psychiatrist YouTuber. I implore you to subscribe. Not only does it help me out immeasurably, but if you subscribe, you will never have to get up in the middle of the night to pee. Guaranteed, or your money back. Okay, getting back onto this case. People have recently been rallying around in support of Germany's revenge mother. That's the name, the moniker she was given, after viewing this resurfaced reconstruction footage. So on the 5th of May 1980, Marianne Bachmeier's daughter was found dead, having been murdered. A man confessed to the killing of the 7-year-old called Klaus Grabowski, and he was 35. He lived next door to Bachmeier in Lübeck, West Germany, and he worked as a butcher. Grabowski was arrested after his fiancée called the police after he confessed to murdering the 7-year-old. It was later discovered that he kept the young girl in his house for hours before using a pair of pantyhose to strangle the young child. Grabowski disposed of the child's body in a bank of a canal, leaving the 7-year-old inside a cardboard box. It's unclear whether or not Grabowski sexually assaulted the child, and he denied doing so. However, the butcher held a previous criminal conviction for child molestation, so no smoke without fire. Instead, the 35-year-old claimed that he killed the 7-year-old because she attempted to seduce him and then blackmail him, asking him for money and threatening to accuse him of assaulting her if he didn't pay up. I mean, come on, a 7-year-old having this kind of dark mind, that's completely unrealistic in my view. During the trial, Grabowski's defense attorney also used the butcher's previous voluntary chemical castration to argue that he'd been experiencing an imbalance of hormones caused by hormone therapy at the time of the murder, which to me doesn't make any sense because chemical castration decreases testosterone. It does, in theory, decrease these kind of lustful thoughts, so it doesn't add up as a defense. By the way, if you're interested, go see my video on chemical castration. I talk about the science behind it in a couple of cases. So on the 4th of March 1981, Grabowski's trial began at the District Court of Lübeck. And on the 6th of March 1981, Bachmeier took out her revenge. She went to the courtroom in possession of a .22 caliber Beretta pistol and fired 8 shots. 6 bullets hit Grabowski. Witnesses at the scene claimed that they heard the mother saying that she wanted to kill the butcher by shooting him in the face. After being shot 6 times, Grabowski died in the floor of the courtroom, and Bachmeier subsequently faced trial for his murder. She soon became known as Germany's revenge mother. Bachmeier's act of retribution was heavily debated, many questioning whether or not she was actually justified in the killing, noting that what he did was horrific. He was her 7-year-old's murderer and possibly sexual assaulter. It was also debated in the eyes of the law whether the mother was guilty of manslaughter or murder and whether or not the shooting was premeditated. However, in 1983, Bachmeier was convicted of the premeditated manslaughter and received a 6-year sentence, although the mother only served half of a sentence before being released. People have since flocked to the comment section in these YouTube videos in support of her. I'm genuinely interested, my Psych for Sore guys and gals. What do you think? Do you think she was justified? Do you think there should have been a legal defense? Do you think she should have been completely acquitted? Do you think she still should have spent time in prison because she did end somebody else's life? Let me know your thoughts in the Schmoment below. By the way, related to this case, I've done a video on Marianne Bachmeier, who went through a horrific ordeal. She was just abused in many, many different ways by her pig of a man husband. She eventually shot him dead, and it's all about battered woman syndrome. Go check out the video. I'll put the description in the links. Before we move on, I would actually like to know if you've got any revenge stories, my Psych for Sore guys and gals. I should say legal revenge stories. Don't incriminate yourself. We don't want 5-0 to be watching this and to be digging up your patio. Right, moving on, I want to do a little bonus for you, my Psych for Sore guys and gals. As I promised before, I'm going to tell you my thoughts on what I think are the worst and best revenge films of all time. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. If you're looking for a ransom, I tell you, I don't have money, but what I do have is a very particular set of skills. Skills I've acquired over a very long career. Writing and recording videos related to true crime and mental illness and the crossover of the two. I don't do the editing because I have the computer skills of a fish with special needs. I pay somebody to do that for me. Skills that make me a nightmare for people like you. If you subscribe now, that will be the end of it. If not, I will look for you. I will pursue you. I will find you and I will kill you. Sorry, I'm just getting distracted there. Okay, the worst revenge film, in my opinion, is The Northman. It's a 2022 American epic historical action thriller directed by Robert Eggers. It features Alexander Skarsgård, who, by the way, has amazing abs throughout the film. Probably the best thing about the film. I'm not that way inclined, but if I was, I'd be thinking, you know. It stars Nicole Kidman, Ethan Hawke, Bjork, and William Dafoe. The plot centres on Amleth, a Viking prince who sets on a quest to avenge the murder of his father. The film is heavily influenced by Norse mythology. For me, it was just a very obvious revenge film. It was amazingly gory, brutal, the fighting was violent, it was really well choreographed. There was one quite big twist which I thought was done well, so those are all the good things. But I just found it incredibly boring. The main characters barely spoke to each other. They literally had no personality, and therefore it's really hard to empathise with them. I didn't feel like I was rooting for them. And also the film was just so obvious and so linear. Apart from that one twist, there was nothing that stood out. There's nothing unique or different. Everything was completely expected, in my opinion. In my opinion, the best revenge film that I've seen, at least in recent times, is Joker. So that was released in 2019 and directed by Todd Phillips. The main character is Arthur Fleck, played by Joaquin Phoenix. And you see how he kind of spirals into this world of deceit and violence and criminality. And I think it's revenge, but one of the reasons it's interesting is because it's not just revenge on any one individual, but on all of society. So Fleck is constantly bullied and disrespected, and you see how he changes. And this is all in the backdrop of a social revolution in Gotham. And we see before our very eyes how this calm and placid and timid person turns into the supervillain. And in my opinion, his character is far more fascinating than Amleth. And we have a connection to him. We can kind of empathise with him as an individual. Those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think about those two films and any other revenge films in the Schmection below. In fact, I like that Joker film so much that I really think I should do a video on my psychoanalysis of Arthur Fleck as an individual. Oh no, wait, I did that shit. I've got a video about that. I will put the links in the description below. Okay, to conclude, to summarise this episode, this whole thing has been a dissection of revenge. We've learned about the motivations, about the character traits. We've asked the ultimate question, does revenge make us feel better? We learned that you love reading Viz, especially Roger's Profanosaurus. We learned why some people commit revenge but not others. I taught you about which personality disorder lends itself to revenge. All of this, and we went through a selected, tragic but fascinating real-life case of revenge. Plus we discussed the best and the worst revenge film. That's all I have to say for today. I implore you to subscribe to my channel. I need the views because I wasn't hugged enough as a kid. Buy my goddamn book, stay euthymic, and whatever happens, do not forget. Do not forget. I love you.